They say ignorance is bliss, but I would have given anything to go back to the days when I was blissfully unaware of the woman I married. Let me start by saying this: I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story. But I guess life has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. I'm a regular guy, married to a woman I thought I knew inside and out. My name's not important, but what's important is what happened. At first, everything was perfect. My wife, let's call her Grace, was the love of my life. She was everything a guy could want. Loving, attentive, always by my side. I didn't think much could shake that foundation. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. It didn't happen overnight, but little by little, I started to notice subtle differences in her behavior. It was like she was slipping away, and I couldn't figure out why. Grace started coming home later than usual. At first, it didn't raise any alarms. She'd say, "Oh, I was with a friend," or "I was running errands." But the excuses started feeling less genuine. She'd claim she was having a girls' night out or busy with work. And every time she'd say it, I felt that nagging feeling in my gut. I started noticing she'd avoid eye contact, her phone was always face down. And sometimes, I'd catch her texting in secret. But I didn't say anything, not at first. I brushed it off and told myself I was overthinking it. I mean, why would she cheat? We were happy, right? But then one night, it all changed. I was talking to Mark, a friend of mine who I trusted, when he dropped a bombshell out of nowhere. He says, "I don't mean to upset you, but I've heard rumors about Grace. People are saying she's been seeing someone else." I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, I tried to laugh it off. I said, "No, you're wrong, that's crazy." But deep down, the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if there was something to it. I didn't want to believe it, but the seed had been planted. The next few days were the hardest. My mind couldn't shut off. Was I just being paranoid? But my mind kept asking the same questions over and over. What if this is true? One evening, as I sat in the living room, I heard my wife speaking in a hushed tone from the next room. There was a nervousness in her voice, a carefulness in the way she spoke. As if she was trying to make sure no one overheard her. My ears perked up, and I instinctively lowered the volume on my phone. I couldn't make out the words, but after a brief pause, I heard the sound of her hanging up. Followed by hurried footsteps. Moments later, she appeared in the hallway, already reaching for her coat and purse. "Where are you going?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, just meeting a friend, running some errands," she said, barely looking at me as she pulled on her shoes. I watched her closely. She avoided eye contact, her movements rushed. As if she was trying to get out before I could ask any more questions. The words themselves weren't unusual. She had used this same excuse many times before. But this time, something about it felt different. She practically bolted out the door before I could say another word. It didn't sit right with me. I had been ignoring my suspicions for weeks, but tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to find the truth I had been avoiding. The second the door shut behind her, I sat there for a moment, gripping my phone, my mind racing. Without another thought, I grabbed my keys and followed. As I tailed her car through the city, I kept a safe distance, careful not to get too close. My mind spun with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Maybe I was about to confirm my worst fear, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she really was just meeting a friend. But if that were the case, why did I feel like I already knew the answer? She drove through town like normal, stopping at red lights, signaling before turns. Nothing erratic or out of place. But then, instead of heading toward the usual spots, Jew pie or best friend's house, the grocery store, the cafe she liked, she took an unexpected turn. I furrowed my brow as she continued down a road leading to one of the wealthier neighborhoods in the city. A place I had never known her to visit before. The further we drove, the more uneasy I became. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where people just stopped by. The houses here were estates, tucked behind high walls and gated driveways. Probably owned by rich businessmen, politicians, and celebrities. As I watched her pull into one of the long driveways, my throat went dry. I parked a little farther down the street, my heartbeat thumping in my ears as I watched her step out of the car. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. She walked straight up to the front door and rang the bell. Moments later, the door opened, and a tall black man stood in the doorway. From where I was sitting, I couldn't see his face clearly. But I saw the way she looked at him, familiar, comfortable. I turned off my engine and waited. An hour passed. I sat there in my car, staring at the house, my mind running in circles. But the longer she stayed inside, the harder it became to deny the obvious. My wife wasn't running errands, she wasn't with a friend, she was here with him. Behind closed doors, in a house I had never seen before, in a neighborhood that felt a world away from our life together. The sense of betrayal overwhelmed me. I wasn't the type of man to sit back and let himself be played for a fool. If she thought she could lie to my face and walk all over me, she was wrong. I stepped out of my car, my resolve firm, my heart pounded as I walked up the driveway. The anger built inside me with every second that passed. I wasn't going to leave without answers. I raised my hand and knocked hard. I heard footsteps on the other side, a pause. Then the door creaked open just enough for someone to look out. The man who had let her in stood there, staring at me, now shirtless. I didn't wait for an invitation. As soon as the door cracked open, I shoved it forward, pushing my way inside. And that's when I saw her. She was sitting on the couch, her shoes and coat off. A drink on the table beside her, looking completely at home, wearing her underwear. This wasn't a quick errand, this wasn't an innocent visit, this was something else entirely. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. I saw the shock register in her face, the panic, the realization that she had been caught. She never expected me to be here, and I never expected her to be this comfortable in another man's house. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to throw accusations, but no words came. Before I could even find the words to speak, the man came closer. Unlike her, he didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked prepared. Something about the way he looked at me, as if he already knew how this was going to play out. Then he spoke, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "You must be the husband," he said, shaking his head slightly, as if he pitied me. I turned back to my wife, expecting her to say something, to offer an excuse, anything, but she didn't. She just sat there, until the man finally exhaled and continued. "She didn't tell you, did she?" he said, his tone almost amused. "Wow, all these years, and she never told you." "Told me what?" My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care, I needed answers. The man chuckled lightly and ran a hand over his jaw. Then, in a voice that was almost too casual, he said, "I know something about your wife that she never wanted you to find out. A little secret from her past, and she's been doing everything she can to keep it buried." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What the hell are you talking about?" For the first time, my wife spoke. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "don't." But it was too late. The man smirked, leaned forward, and looked me dead in the eye. "Your wife used to be a prostitute." The words hung in the air. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I searched my wife's face, waiting for her to call him a liar. Waiting for her to deny it, to tell me this was some kind of sick joke. But she didn't. Her face crumpled, her hands trembling in her lap. And that was all the confirmation I needed. I took a step back, my mind refusing to accept what I had just heard. This woman, my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had loved and trusted, had been hiding an entire life from me. And not just any secret, but something that had been following her, haunting her to the point where she had to pay this man to keep quiet. She's been satisfying me to keep my mouth shut, the man added, shrugging, as if this was all business to him. And I got to say, she's been good about it. I couldn't breathe. The worst part wasn't just that she had been a prostitute. The worst part was that she had spent our entire marriage lying about it. And now, I was standing in the ruins of everything I thought was real. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions of life, but everything felt distant, like I was watching myself from the outside. I would wake up next to her, but the woman lying beside me wasn't the same person I had known for years. Or maybe she was, and I had just never really known her at all. Every time I looked at her, I saw the truth I could never unlearn. I saw the woman who had lied to me for our entire marriage. I saw a woman who had a past I never knew existed. And worst of all, I saw the woman who had let me believe we were building something real, when in reality, she had been living with a secret so big that it had eventually come crashing down on both of us. I wanted to hate her, but at the same time, I couldn't. I had spent years trusting her, believing in her, and planning a future with her. And now, all of that felt like a joke. She tried to talk to me, but I wasn't ready to hear it. What could she possibly say? That she was sorry? That she never meant for me to find out? That she loved me? Love didn't mean much when it was built on deception. Every word she spoke sounded like static to me, an empty noise in the middle of my storm. I didn't know what was worse, the betrayal itself or the fact that she had been willing to let me live in ignorance, hoping I'd never uncover the truth. A question haunted me in those days. What now? What was I supposed to do with this information? Was I supposed to expose her secret to the world, tell our families, our friends? Was I supposed to leave, burn this entire marriage to the ground, and start over? Or was I supposed to bury what I had learned, act like I never knew, and keep living the life we had built? I turned this over in my mind endlessly, but every answer felt wrong. If I stayed, I would never be able to forget what I knew. How could I wake up next to her every morning and pretend that everything was okay? How could I look at her and not see the woman who had spent years selling her body and made sure I never knew? But if I left, then what? Would I be walking away from a marriage that, despite everything, had been good in so many ways? Would I be ruining my own life over something that had happened long before she met me? I hated myself for even considering staying. A part of me wanted to believe that maybe this didn't change anything. After all, her past was her past, right? But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about her past, it was about the lie, the years of deception. The way she had looked me in the eye day after day and chosen not to tell me. But sleeping with someone outside to keep things hidden. Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. I stopped eating properly. I barely functioned at work. I wanted to shut my brain off, to forget, but forgetting wasn't an option. I wasn't the same anymore. I barely spoke to her. She started trying harder, cooking my favorite meals, asking if I wanted to talk, and sitting beside me in silence, like she was waiting for me to come back to her. Something inside me had broken, and no amount of effort on her part could fix it. The days dragged on. I had spent so much energy trying to figure out if I could forgive her, if I could rebuild what we had, that I never stopped to ask if I wanted to. And the truth was, I didn't. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what else she had hidden from me. I didn't want to force myself to accept a version of love that was built on deception. I didn't want to keep breaking myself just to make the marriage work. I had to let go. The realization was gut-wrenching. But at the same time, it was the clearest thought I had in weeks. And no matter how much I had loved her, I loved myself enough to know that I couldn't do this anymore. When I finally sat her down to have the conversation, I thought I was ready for whatever came next. I had rehearsed what I was going to say in my head 100 times. I want a divorce. That's what I had planned to say. But the moment I uttered those words, she just stared at me, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. Then her eyes filled with panic, and before I knew it, she was reaching for my hands, gripping them so tightly. "No, no, please," she whispered, shaking her head frantically. "We can fix this. I love you. I still love you. Please don't do this." I watched her crumble in front of me. I had never seen her this desperate, this broken. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice hoarse. "But it was a mistake," she sobbed. "I swear it was a moment of weakness, it didn't mean anything. I was scared, I was being blackmailed, I didn't know what else to do." I closed my eyes, exhaling sharply. "You didn't know what else to do. You cheated on me, you lied to me, you spent years hiding who you really were. And now you're sitting here telling me that none of it meant anything?" She shook her head violently. "No, that's not what I meant, I didn't want to lose you. I was scared of what you'd think of me if you knew the truth," her voice cracked. "I love you, you're my husband, this doesn't have to end like this." "I don't trust you," I said, my voice quieter now but firm, "and I never will again." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands, pleading with me to reconsider. She promised to do better, she promised to make it up to me. She swore that she would spend the rest of her life proving that she was still the woman I fell in love with. No matter how much she cried, no matter how many times she begged, I knew one thing for certain: I was done. In the days that followed, she didn't let up. The tears, the apologies, the desperate attempts to convince me to stay never stopped. She went from crying to promising to change, from promising to change to blaming the situation. From blaming the situation to blaming me. "You're throwing away everything we built," she accused one night, her voice laced with bitterness. "I made mistakes, but so do you, you're not perfect either." I stared at her, exhausted. "Mistakes?" I repeated. She scoffed, wiping her tears aggressively. "You're so self-righteous," she snapped. "Like you're the only one who's hurting. You think this doesn't kill me too?" That was when I realized, she wasn't sorry for what she had done, she was sorry that she got caught. She tried everything. Guilt, anger, manipulation. One day, she'd be crying in my arms, telling me she couldn't live without me. The next, she'd be cold and distant, acting like I was the one destroying our marriage. She called my family and my friends, trying to get them to talk sense to me. She painted herself as a broken woman who had made a single mistake. Who just needed forgiveness, who just needed her husband to be reasonable. Without mentioning exactly what happened. So when I finally filed for divorce, I thought the worst was over. I thought she would finally accept it, I thought she would let go. I was wrong. The moment she realized I wasn't backing down, things got ugly. The tears stopped, the desperation turned to anger. And suddenly, the woman who had spent weeks begging me to stay became the woman who was determined to make me pay for leaving. She fought the divorce every step of the way, she refused to sign the papers. Dragged out the legal process for as long as she could, and made ridiculous demands in court. At first, she tried to argue that I was making a rash decision, that I was overreacting, that we just needed time. But when that didn't work, she switched tactics. She started making accusations, saying that I was cold, emotionally distant. And that I had abandoned her when she needed me most. She twisted the story, painting herself as the victim. Telling anyone who would listen that I had thrown away our marriage because I couldn't handle her past. She left out the part where she had been lying to me for years. She left out the part where she had cheated. I sat through meetings with lawyers, listening to her argue that she deserved more. More time, more money, more of my life than I had already wasted on her. I watched as she tried to manipulate the legal system the same way she had tried to manipulate me. And even though I knew the truth, even though I had all the evidence I needed to prove why I was leaving, the process drained every ounce of energy I had left. But no matter what she did, no matter how much she fought, I refused to let her win. The day the divorce was finalized, I expected to feel relief. The fight had drained me physically, emotionally, mentally. The accusations, the manipulation, the endless back and forth with lawyers had chipped away at whatever was left of the man I used to be. My ex-wife had made sure that leaving her wouldn't be easy, and she had succeeded. But in the end, it didn't matter. She could fight, she could delay, she could try to break me. But I had made my decision, and now, I was finally free. I moved out of the house we once shared. I packed up my things and left behind the memories that were too heavy to carry. I burned the old photos, deleting every trace of our life together. There's no gain in holding on to the past. The marriage was over, but my life was just beginning. If there's one thing I've taken away from all of this, it's that you should never walk blindly into a relationship. No matter how much you think you know the person. Love makes us see what we want to see, it makes us ignore the small red flags. The inconsistencies, the things that don't quite add up. I trusted too easily. I believed in the version of my wife that she presented to me, never questioning if there was more beneath the surface. And that blind trust, it cost me years of my life. So if you're planning to spend the rest of your life with someone, do yourself a favor. Study them. Learn their past, not just the version they tell you, but the one that exists outside of their words. Talk to people who knew them before they met you. Look for the things they don't say, the details they try to avoid. Because if I had done that, maybe I wouldn't have ended up here, telling you my story as a warning. I'm not saying you should assume the worst about people. But I am saying that trust is something that should be earned, not given freely just because you love someone. Love isn't enough to build a marriage, truth is, honesty is. And once those things are gone, no amount of love can bring them back. What do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed? Would you have forgiven her, or would you have walked away like I did? Let me know, because maybe there's something to learn from this beyond just my own pain. Maybe someone out there needs to hear this before they make the same mistake I did.